G'day, V-Dubs here, and how you doing? Today's video is about installing the turbo motor into the Beetle. Because the turbo motor is 6 times more powerful than a standard VW 1600 engine, with the turbo motor I bought a Freeway Flyer gearbox, and that came in the crate as part of the package. So this next shot is just taking the gearbox out. It's got higher gear ratios. Because you've got the extra power, you can make use of the higher gear ratios without being slow in traffic, and it makes driving along the highway a lot easier. So we'll start to install this gearbox and then the motor. So to remove the gearbox, we start inside the car. So under the back seat you'll see this plate, and if you undo the Phillips screw, the inspection plate should come off, and it'll show you the linkage from the gear lever to the gearbox. If we just remove that, and there you have the gear linkage. So what you need to do is undo the safety wire. Just snip that with a pair of wire snippers, and you need to undo that nut over there. If you put the vehicle in second, it actually pulls the lever forward away. So this is attached to the gearbox, and this is the gear lever in the car. So that's the first step. I'll cut the wire and undo that nut, and then the linkage inside the car is loose. Alright, so now that we've undone the inside, the next step to freeing up the gearbox is taking off these CV drive shafts, and they are held on with a whole lot of cap screws, and they require a specialized VW tool because it's I think it's 12 blades. I don't know if you can see that, but they're pretty easy to take out, and I think there's 6 of them per side. Also, while we're here, we need to undo this wing nut and release the clutch cable from the clutch lever. That's just the Bowden tube. Once that's complete, we need to undo those bolts underneath the front of the gearbox, which is bolting it to the car chassis, and in the middle is that rubber gearbox mount, and depending on the state of the gearbox mount, if you're replacing it, you need to take off all the bolts. Otherwise, if it's just the gearbox, it's just those ones on the gearbox there. And then lastly, to remove the gearbox, we just need to undo these 2 big bolts over here, which take a 21mm socket, and that'll free off The gearbox then gets pulled backwards and out. Okay, so here's the old existing gearbox out, and we're now ready to install the new freeway flyer. So this shot is the new gearbox installed, and really it was just the reverse procedure of taking the existing one out. What you'll note from this photo is just that the drive shafts were wrapped in plastic bags, just so that they kept clean and the grease is kept in them. And I've just used elastic straps to hold them up and out the way. Just makes it easier when you're taking gearboxes in and out. So this is the firewall. Initially just sprayed it black, but the plan is actually I'm going to put in a mirror coating. It's a covering that you can buy, and it just gives it a nice finish. So this is after I've installed the firewall cover. It's just a very thin piece of metal with a mirror finish, and I've just drilled some holes and put in some pop rivets to hold it to the firewall. So this is the new motor we're putting in, the 223 turbo motor. But you'll see from the carb on the top, it's in a very different position. Normally the throttle cable will come through down there, but that's all blocked with an intake manifold. So what we're going to have to do is extend the throttle cable, so we'll do that now. We start in the car by removing this cover, and those is two 17mm bolts. So I undid, these are 17mm bolts, two of them to get this cover off, and there you can see the accelerator lever with the cable attached. You just need to, that little S bend, and you just pull the cable out. So just got multi-use grease down here, and we're greasing the cable and feeding it through. There's a tube on the tunnel. It's a bit dark in here, you can't really see it, but it's fed through its own specific tube. So just make sure to send it through that tube. Lots of grease, and just keep feeding the cable. Okay, so we're just greasing up the connection. Cable. That fits the pedal. Can you just push that pedal in there, please? Just looking in there. It's a bit tricky to get the E-clip on, but that's really what the whole fitting looks like, with the pedal attached. I've just left the cover off with the two bolts for now. Once we hooked up the throttle cable, I'll then put the cover back. So this is the back of the engine. Just cleaned up the engine bay before the new engine goes in. And this is the accelerator cable we're talking about. You can see it just coming out. Give it a push. This cable is longer than the other one, just to reach across the motor to the new carb. So here we are installing the motor, and we just got it balanced on the jack. But because the motor is actually wider than a standard 1600, it's got to come up skew so that you can fit in the tappet covers. So that's why we are lifting it at an angle to get it past the sheet metal inside the engine bay. Just checking behind it to make sure the throttle cable and any other wires are not getting caught. Now just positioning it so that it'll fit on the drive shaft and the bottom bolts. Again, it has to come up at an angle and then straighten it to fit it onto the gearbox bell housing. So just a little bit of movement up and down to make sure you align the drive shaft. At this stage it's actually off the jack and it's on the two bottom bolts. Just letting the jack down slowly so that it'll slide onto the bolts. And wiggling it in. That's it, it's in, it's on the bolts. Just checking that the cables are free. As it came up, it knocked off one of the tappet covers, so just putting the tappet cover back on. Making sure it's mated up hard up against the gearbox, and then we'll just put on the three nuts, and the last bolt, put it through. Tighten them up, and that's it, the engine's in. Again, just making sure it's mated properly. If you really struggle to put it in sometimes, if you turn the flywheel slightly, it helps to align the splines of the drive shaft with the flywheel. And that's it, the turbo motor is installed. Just the 4 bolts to tighten it in. Alright, thanks again for watching. Take care and God bless. Thanks again for watching, and be sure to like, share, subscribe, and leave me any comments.